Workers were crushed to death by a crane last week in São Paulo. But Brazilian authorities are facing another challenge. Our Focus report today takes a look at how they're preparing to maintain security. 3.3 million tickets will be sold overall, and police are bracing themselves to protect fans from attacks by criminal gangs. And as John Dillermore and Aurélien Barros report, they're not the only threat.
C'est pas le terrain qui s'adapte à toi, c'est toi qui t'adaptes au terrain.
Words of wisdom from French riot officers to military police in Rio de Janeiro. They're here to teach Brazilians how to deal with rioting.
We're not used to demonstrations. This is something new for police in Rio and Brazil as a whole, I think. So we really have to get trained up.
These officers are more used to fighting heavily armed drug traffickers than taking on political activists.
We're putting the emphasis on non-lethal methods. The aim is to restore public order while respecting the idea of citizenship, in the sense that we're not dealing with criminals or delinquents.
But police still use firearms, clubs, even electric stun guns against protesters with alarming regularity. A controversial strategy for a democratic country, but one that's emerged from the battle against drug trafficking and other violent crime. In Sao Paulo, half of its 19 million inhabitants have already been victims of theft or assault.
I was near the metro in the Eastern District, and I was attacked with a gun.
At any given moment, something is happening. A motorbike or car theft, an abduction, domestic violence. So no, I don't feel safe.
And things won't be improving for the World Cup. That's the view of this French security expert.
The police must reassure everybody, including FIFA and foreigners, that everything will be under control. The methods will certainly be in place, but not everything will be controllable. Inevitably, organized crime gangs will be active. The possible financial windfall from tourists or expatriates will be too big for them to ignore.
Among the forces fighting against drugs is Captain Cassio and his team.
May God bless and protect you. Work well.
They're on patrol, heading for the stadium where the opening World Cup match will be played.
In this district, there are murders and drug trafficking. It was much worse before, but it's still not a quiet area.
Police here face danger on a daily basis. Last year, they lost 106 of their colleagues, and the pressure on them is mounting. The PCC, Brazil's main criminal gang, is threatening to target the World Cup.
It's a real threat. They're already active, and all the indications are that it will intensify, but it won't affect the event itself.
Across the country, hundreds of thousands of security personnel will be mobilized, sporting brand new equipment. But the federal police, the equivalent of the FBI, is trying to play down the threat posed by the PCC.
A preocupação das forças de segurança brasileiras hoje é
the main concern of Brazilian security forces is to reduce the risk of petty crime, because today the PCC isn't seen as a real threat to security forces.
Considerada pelas forças de segurança.
The most unpredictable factor, however, remains the protests, and that's where the government is cracking down. More than 250 students and other activists have already been arrested, some of them imprisoned, under a law which was last applied under the dictatorship.
There's no proof, there's nothing.
For this human rights lawyer, it's a troubling development.
It's like, you can demonstrate, but if I think you've committed a crime, I'll arrest you. It's somewhat reminiscent of a fascist authoritarian state where people are monitored. Under the rule of law, it's different. A person will protest, but will only be arrested if a crime is really committed. That's how it should work.
Some activists are already behind bars. In a protest in Rio de Janeiro, this man chained himself to the front of the city council and began a hunger strike.
Here in Brazil, a politician who steals billions doesn't see the inside of a prison, or if he does, he's free 2 weeks later. While someone who just protested is in prison for months without the slightest proof. That isn't democracy.
Brazil's Congress is working on a new law to define terrorism. Activists fear it could be used to discourage demonstrators ahead of the World Cup.
Now it's time for our sports roundup, beginning with the latest football action here in France.
In French Ligue 1, PSG fell to a surprise 2-0 defeat away to Evian. Clark and Siklu and Modosugu with the goals there, enough to bring the capital club's 36-game unbeaten run to a halt, just one match short of their club record. The defending champions lead at the top now cut to a single point after Lille's win over Marseille on Tuesday night. In England, Arsenal maintain their 4-point lead at the top of the Premier League thanks to goals from Mesut Ozil and Nicholas Bentner. Chelsea recovered from a goal down to beat Sunderland 4-3. Luis Suarez scored 4 as Liverpool crushed Norwich 5-1, while Manchester United's 12-match unbeaten run ended at Old Trafford with a 1-0 defeat against David Moyes' former club Everton. As the football world gears up for Friday's eagerly anticipated World Cup draw, FIFA have announced that the 3 stadia being built for the 2014 World Cup in Brazil will not be ready for the end-of-year deadline. Brazil's government had previously pledged to deliver all the stadiums, some renovated and some brand new, by December 31st of this year. 6 stadia were finished ahead of the Confederations Cup earlier this season. They will all be delivered in January because the 3 stadia that were to be delivered in December, I asked the governors to deliver them in January because of President Rousseff's schedule. On top of building concerns, Brazil is having to deal with resurgent criminal violence in some of Rio's slums, but the government is pulling out all the stops to ensure the competition runs smoothly. Well, now this violence that we're up against, that we're fighting, and by that I mean not only the federal government, but also state governments and the military police. We're utilising the investments that we're making, that we've already made and will continue to make to prevent this kind of violence with everything at our disposal. The country is spending about $12 billion to prepare for the World Cup, with another $15 billion to follow for the 2016 Rio Summer Olympics. He's arguably the greatest player of all time, and he certainly knows a thing or two about winning a World Cup. A national treasure, Edson Arantes do Nascimento, better known as Pelé, is the all-time leading scorer for the Brazil national football team, and also the only footballer with 3 World Cup winners' medals. But what does he think of his homeland's chances this summer? I don't think Brazil needs to fear any team. They have to respect them, though, respect all the teams. The shift of power may have moved from South America to Europe since his glory days, but Pelé doesn't think it's all a foregone conclusion. In football today, the best teams from Europe are Germany and Spain. Without a doubt, they are 2 great teams. But the World Cup can always produce surprises, and I hope that Brazil reaches the final. And it wouldn't be the first time. The Seleção have the most World Cup wins under their belt, having won the trophy a record 5 times, with 2 final losses as well. Reigning world and European champions Spain are defending their title in Brazil next summer will be their next major challenge. 62-year-old coach Vicente Del Bosque has a golden generation of players in his squad and is expected to do well. Spain won the last World Cup in South Africa after beating the Dutch 1-0 in the final, and Del Bosque is keeping his cards close to his chest. Well, we may prefer one team to another, but at the end, the ones that come out of the draw are the ones that we will play against, and all draws are the same, so we're not going to speculate. Italy coach Cesare Prandelli has urged FIFA to ensure there'll be water breaks during the games. Del Bosque gave his thoughts on the issue. Seems like a good idea. In the experience that we had during the Confederations Cup, it's true that the players were suffering a lot. The Spanish coach will be in Brazil this week to learn the fate of his team at the World Cup draw on Friday in Bahia. 3 Grand Prix have been removed from the provisional Formula 1 calendar for 2014, the International Automobile Federation's annual general meeting on Wednesday. Races in New Jersey, Mexico and South Korea had been included in a bloated 22-race program for next season, but the FIA has finally decided to keep the current program of 19 races.
Stuart Norval is up next with the latest from Bangui, the capital of the Central African Republic, where shots were fired this morning, just hours before a UN Security Council vote is to send more foreign troops to the country to avert further violence. Stay with us here on France 24.